One of the joys of travel is probably experiencing some wonderful musical moments. Opera in the arena in Verona, the Four Seasons in a church in Venice. But probably my most memorable one, which was over 30 years ago, actually happened in my own state of South Australia. It was 1988, the bicentennial year, and to celebrate, South Australia came up with this sort of wacky idea of doing opera in the outback. Hardly opera, it was really highlights of opera, but it doesn't really matter. What was important, that somehow they produced, in the middle of a desert in the northern Flinders Ranges, this amazing night of music and joy. Adelaide Symphony Orchestra, Dame Kirija Tanawa, nearly all of the rolling stock of what was then called Australian National, the Australian National Railways, was put on hold and sent to this little tiny town of 7 people called Beltana, where 8,000 people assembled for a day of fun. Races in the morning, afternoon, and hopefully you're all sober enough then to get into this amazing gorge where we all sat and waited in this amazingly still sunset for this concert to happen. And some of the memorable things were actually not so much the music, but the fact that we all walked in, we all sat down and remained reasonably quiet. They asked us to wait at dusk because the sunset was taking a bit longer than they intended, and the sun would have been in our eyes. But just at the point of sunset, probably about 2,000 galahs flew across the whole arena of the stage. And one of my cynical friends sitting nearby said, I wonder how much that cost them to bring on. Anyway, the concert started and it was breathtaking. Dame Kirija was at her best, the Adelaide Symphony Orchestra was at its best, and we had highlights of the Puccini, Mozart, the sort of highlights you'd expect again, and Gershwin with Porgy and Bess. And it was just one of those magical nights where 8,000 people sat on the edge of their chair thinking, is this really going to happen? Is something going to go wrong? But nothing went wrong. Another memory I have, and I haven't been able to confirm it, perhaps I had too much to drink, was one of the encores. She sang, of all things, Climb Every Mountain from The Sound of Music. And as she sang it, every light, every spotlight then went slowly up the hills and lit the whole wonderful ground around us. And we sort of finished on that lovely memory. And then they had to feed us. It's worth knowing that there was no power, there was no water, there were no facilities. Everything was built with the help of the Army and Australian National and created this wonderful event. And whilst it has been done again, I think those that were there that night experienced something that would never be done again. The encores weren't as good the second time around, but one of those musical nights that you never forget.
In 1966, Kim Smith and I were in London and were there at the time that the Adelaide Girls Choir was passing through on their way to Vienna for a youth choral festival. They were with Margaret Lang, their conductor, and Margaret and Kim both taught at the same school, at which many of the girls attended here in Adelaide. They sang at Westminster Abbey. We were lucky enough to get in and have a listen and watch them and meet them, and it was absolutely beautiful, pious, joyful, and I thought quite superb. After the concert, or after the evensong, actually it wasn't a concert, it was the evensong service at the Abbey, we were chatting outside with some of the parishioners, and we met one of them and chatted at length with her, and she said as we're leaving, well, they did quite well for colonials. Well, what do? Just take a breath and smile and walk on. A few days later, the choir goes off to Vienna, and what happened? They won first prize. Brilliant.
In 1996, I was in Milan in Italy, and I was quite keen to see Leonardo da Vinci's painting or mural of the Last Supper, which is in the refectory of the convent of Santa Maria delle Grazie. I went there on a couple of occasions, but each time it was closed. Seems to be the case in Italy. Anyway, with a friend a bit later, we wandered into the Duomo, or the main cathedral in Milan, which was virtually empty. And as we were wandering around, it started to fill up with nuns dressed in their full habit, black and white. And a bit later, the doors of the cathedral closed and the nuns started singing. And within the cathedral, this was an amazing experience. It really could only be described as perhaps heavenly.